Let me give you a little introduction here. Chris Wang is the founder of Shimmer. Chris was pursuing her dual master's degree from Berkeley when she was diagnosed with ADHD and took a leave to start Shimmer, which is an ADHD coaching app. She's all things social impact and consumer. She's worked at Bain & Co., advising Fortune 100 companies on social impact strategy and launched consumer startups all over the world. I obviously was reading that, so let's bring that to life a little bit. Chris, so nice to have you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I've been to a couple Cave Day events already. It's always such a good vibe. So thank you so much for having me, and excited to see everyone from all over the world.
Yeah, it's Chris, we met at some point last year, and Shimmer and Cave Day started working together on a nice partnership because there's some nice overlap between what Cave Day does in really helping people focus and Shimmer helping folks with ADHD through this coaching app. And I was hoping that you could give us a little bit of a Cliff Notes on Shimmer. What is it? Who is it for? Benefits? Just so we have an understanding of what it is you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. So in a nutshell, I guess our mission or why we exist is primarily driven off of when I got diagnosed and I couldn't find any kind of affordable behavioral solution or behavioral care. So our mission is to help every adult, not just adults who kind of have really great benefits at work, but every adult with ADHD reach their full potential. And a big part of what we do is the last part of our mission statement, which is their way. So having it personalized, which is why the one-on-one and the real human part is so important to us, because everyone has a different journey and different things will work for different people, which I think we'll get into it more. But essentially we serve adults with ADHD, ranges everything from kind of top level execs, founders, engineers, stay-at-home moms or dads, designers. It really runs the gamut, all adults. And essentially you meet each week with a dedicated coach that we match you to. You set goals, you create a plan to reach them, and then your coach kind of celebrates you on the sidelines and keeps you accountable to whatever it is that you decided that you're trying to change in your behavior or the goals that you're trying to reach.
That's really cool. I want to come back to the celebrating later, because that's something that we think is really important in the cave as well. Just making a note for myself. So I think it's important that we define ADHD. I'm sure a lot of folks here, it's thrown around a lot, which I know we're also going to discuss. But and I'm certain that most of us know what the acronym is, but what does it actually mean? And how does it show up in people's lives?
Yeah, definitely. For folks who have ADHD, this is maybe a little bit basic, but essentially it is a bag of different symptoms that you can satisfy different pieces of it, which is why everyone's ADHD looks very different. So there's a big list of symptoms that fall under the first bucket of attention. And then there's a big list of symptoms that fall under the second bucket, which is hyperactivity/impulsivity. So the inactive part, imagine kind of when you're a kid, it's that person who's daydreaming, can't focus. As you get to an adult, the inattention may look like not being able to focus or get distracted really easily. And there's kind of a big list of them. And then the hyperactivity, impulsivity side, as an adult, it's more so kind of restlessness, racing thoughts, impulsivity with actions and words, risk-taking behavior. So it'll look different in each person, but essentially you can be either one type, which is attention, one type, which is hyperactivity, impulsivity, or you can be combined, which is you satisfy enough symptoms to be in both of them, which is the type that I was diagnosed with. And so that you can imagine there's so many different types of permutations in that could be drawn. So it really shows up differently in each person. And that's why it's really hard to draw an archetype for people with ADHD. And so anything you see on TikTok or Instagram is probably simplified and really is just the experience of that person.
Yeah, it almost sounds like in your description here, it's like an umbrella. Like, okay, do you fall under this umbrella? Cool, come on in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so can you tell us a little more about why this is important to you when you got diagnosed? I think there's so many of us that are like, oh, I wonder if I have this, especially in the world that we live in, this very distracted world. But what finally led you to say, oh, I think I need to check this?
Yeah, so one part of the diagnosis that isn't talked as much about, which may help folks understand if they have, or like, I guess better know if they have ADHD or not, is actually it has to significantly, your ADHD symptoms have to significantly impact at least two areas of your life. So it's not just, oh, I don't focus easily, but it's that it actually impacts your life. And another part of the symptoms criteria is that it has to be there since you were under 12 years old. So it's not that if you just had a spurt of 6 months where you were super hyperactive or you were super inattentive that you suddenly have ADHD. Most people have ADHD, or most to all people have ADHD since they're a kid, just oftentimes it wasn't diagnosed. But for me, this topic's super important to me because at the time that I was diagnosed, we were going through a pivot. So Shimmer was not doing very hot. I did not have a lot of the structures and the routines that I previously had in other jobs, like having a boss and having like daily deliverables and all that stuff. And we're going through a pivot, and I was having a lot of self-esteem issues because my identity was so tied to our company, and our company wasn't doing well. So I felt like I wasn't doing well. And so with all of that, it essentially kind of broke down a lot of the coping mechanisms and the systems that I had in place because a lot of things were happening at once. And that's part of the reason why it led me to my diagnosis. But I actually kind of knew I had ADHD since I was younger. My dad's not diagnosed, but we're pretty sure he has ADHD. And it's very hereditary. It's like 80% of the risk factors come from genetics. So there was a bunch of things that kind of led to it. And I think that moment in my life was kind of the tipping point. And similar to why I care a lot about in general, like preventative mental health and getting screening and all of that, is hopefully for folks, it doesn't have to get to the tipping point in order to seek care, in order to get the right diagnoses, whatever, even if it's not ADHD, in your lives. And so for me, it's important to get that care to people, and to raise awareness about ADHD and what the symptoms are and what kind of care you can get, because so many people with ADHD are so smart, so creative, so like full of energy and zest, and just the situation that they're in right now, like whether it's their job or their home or whatever, is just not conducive of having that shine. And so with coaching, that's one thing that we will jump into it more, but really is not just helping the individual, but really helping them like shape their world around them so that they do feel better and they are able to shimmer.
So you actually started Shimmer before you had an official diagnosis.
Yeah, so people, if you ever read any like news about startups, they always only paint like the narrative that makes sense, and it's usually not fully true. And so we actually used to have a whole other Shimmer before the Shimmer, and we did support groups. So we ran all sorts of support groups, anxiety, depression, identity-based. So we had queer, Asian, Black, all sorts of support groups. And for a bunch of different reasons, that ended up not working out, and we shut it down. So that was what we call Shimmer 1.0, and ADHD is actually Shimmer 2.0. But we had like a lull in between.
Yeah. Well done in the pivot.
Thank you.
It's interesting because I do feel like, oh man, ADHD is so buzzy right now, right? Like it's become part of our it's like, it's part of our zeitgeist. It's like, you can't, maybe because we live in that, you and I really live in that world of helping folks with ADHD, or we're seeing it a lot. But I would gather that most folks tuning in here, they're seeing a lot more about ADHD than maybe 3 years ago, like when the pandemic hit. Yeah. I do think that it's because of the way we've shifted, the way that our working world has shifted, we're more aware of how our focus. But I do think that it seems to me that a lot of people are self-diagnosing. Like I have self-diagnosed ADHD, and this is a very real disorder. And I wonder, I just want to hear your thoughts around ADHD sort of being thrown around kind of casually.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of opinions about this. For me, it's not as black and white. I personally side more towards I'm happy about this. I think that, yes, I'll get into the cons, but on the pro side, it really does raise awareness since everyone's talking about it. Of course, some people get super mad about it. And there's always going to be that about any topic. I think there's really two things going on here. There is raising awareness of ADHD and diagnoses that are real. And there's also just the fact that our society is like driving our attention down the drain, ADHD or not. And so those two things are being conflicted or sometimes confused with each other. And I think that there are a lot of positive impacts of this, actually, that their ADHD is gaining more awareness. The stigma is kind of reducing around the term ADHD, and like there's tons of kind of strategies and skills and just resources being poured into things that people with ADHD will benefit from. I think the issue, kind of the con side of thing is of course, if people who don't have ADHD are kind of belittling an actual kind of condition or disability, then that's a different situation. And because most people don't understand kind of what I mentioned before about like ADHD actually having to impact your life, being there since you're a kid. And so that's why some self-diagnoses are true and some aren't. And then there's also, you've probably heard of the I guess the meds or Adderall shortage right now. And then the more people who are kind of like self-diagnosing or even like just getting it just to study, of course that impacts people who truly use medicine as treatment and need it to live their daily life. So I think, like most things, it's not super black and white. I definitely think that there's more pros than cons, and the cons are probably solvable if we put our resources and efforts on it. But I think the raised awareness and lessening of stigma, especially within certain cultures, is like a big win for the ADHD community.
I love that. I hadn't actually, it makes a lot of sense. I hadn't really thought about that in that through that lens. That's really helpful. You know, in with Cave Day too, we see so many people who come in and like, I have such a hard time focusing, and myself included. And I'm pretty sure I don't have ADHD, but I have trouble focusing. So many of us do. And so what I love about services like Cave Day or Shimmer, these are not just accessible to folks with ADHD. It really is for any person who needs that kind of support with, you know, with focus. So that's, you know, part of why I love our overlap. So well, I wanted to go back for a second and like you're a woman, you identify as a woman. It seems like women are often go undiagnosed, or you know, that women, you don't get it, you don't get a diagnosis until you're much older. And I don't know, like, what's behind that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons. I actually just made a reel about it if anyone wants to go to our Instagram. But
Her reels are great. Her reels are great.
I recently started them, so I'm still learning, but they're really fun. Yeah, so the biggest thing is like two factors playing into each other, which is generally, it's actually not the case for me, but generally women will be more likely to present inattentive symptoms rather than hyperactive. And those inattentive symptoms are more internal, in terms of like a teacher, it's harder for a teacher to see it. Like if you're daydreaming or you're not focusing in class, it doesn't bother the teacher, as especially if you're smart and you get your good grades and all that, versus if you're hyperactive, which oftentimes boys are more, and you're disrupting the class, you're interrupting, you're running around. That's something that immediately the teacher will be able to catch and potentially have that conversation with the parent. And so there's not just the fact of the inattention, but it's also the fact that diagnostic criteria itself and also the studies that were done to create those criterias and to create the little descriptions about how those criteria show up, are most of the research is done on boys, like younger boys. Like it doesn't even really include adults until recently, like Russell Barkley and some other folks kind of, and the DSM-5 has like little sentences that are like, oh, if it's an adult, this is how it looks different, but that's all relatively new. So the kind of like the inattentive symptoms matched with the gender bias and the criteria, those two things drive most of the impact. But there's also some kind of smaller things like women, oftentimes, and girls will mask or hide those symptoms just based on like culturally how we're kind of like raised to be a little bit like quieter and that kind of thing. So those are kind of like the bigger factors. There's a lot of kind of smaller factors and that exacerbate this issue throughout life, because once you're not diagnosed, there's downstream effects that can lead to things like anxiety and depression and eating disorders, that then once you're there, you have more symptoms that could be confused for other things, and then ADHD is even less likely to be diagnosed correctly. But we see story after story of people who are later diagnosed who have been taking so many like anxiety and depression meds their whole life, and then once they got their ADHD diagnosis, got the treatment, made the changes in their life, made the behavioral changes, and the kind of starting reaching their goals, those other things start to go down, which is pretty beautiful, I guess.
Yeah. I was thinking that I wonder if once you get this diagnosis, if it almost feels like a gift in a way, like, that, like, not a gift, but like it's a puzzle piece, right? Like, that was that missing
Yeah.
piece that then trickles, to has all these effects on other things like anxiety and depression. And it stems from somewhere. And if you have that diagnosis, I can imagine it could help support these other underlying issues.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like kind of with anything, it's like awareness is step one. If you don't even have the awareness and you're just trying to like throw different medications at somebody and you don't even know what's going on in their head yet, that does not work. But I see a comment actually in the chat about older and ADHD as well. So I think I saw a stat recently. I don't know how true this is. I need to check in on it, but it said like there were like 0% of people, like very close to zero, above 70, that actually had diagnoses with ADHD, which is wild because obviously there are people above 70 who have ADHD. But it's just that raising awareness and kind of lessening stigma, and like also doctors being more aware to be able to spot these things to give these diagnoses. But yes, I agree completely. Like basically most research is done based off of children who are boys and who are usually Caucasian as well.
Yeah. And my brother was diagnosed with ADD back in the
day.
back in the 90s, like early 90s, and it was so stigmatized. Like it was a family secret. We didn't want anyone to know. We had like a family meeting. This is something that we keep to ourselves.
Wow.
And my brother, had Ritalin, which also different conversation, but it was very different than it is now. And now it's just like, who has ADHD? Raise your hand. I wanted to bring things back a little bit more towards coaching and how ADHD coaching can support those with ADHD or not. So what are the main issues or challenges people come to ADHD coaching with that you see?
So actually before we started this, we had a hypothesis and then it was wrong. Maybe because of the bias of myself, I thought it was going to be related to work a lot. But the number one thing that people come with is literally just, it sounds very wide, but just frustration of not reaching their full potential, and this like deep sense of either like sadness or shame or regret, or like wondering what if of like what their life could have looked like if they knew this earlier or treated this earlier, like what that like parallel or not so parallel path may have looked like. And so what we do in coaching, which is a lot more than kind of if you just, I don't know, like have like education or whatever, is like that actually unpacking that for that specific person and helping them for the first time, like think about like what is the future that I want with my ADHD, and also like how do I cope with what has happened in the past. And so that is like by far the like umbrella of what people come with, and which is really like sad on like one end, but also when there is kind of work being done that truly moves someone away from that mindset and for the better, that's really exciting for me, and seeing kind of the impact that we can have on folks, even if it's not like solving everything, but just making like slow progress to having like a day-to-day and hope for the future that looks different from before. But then there's that like as an umbrella term, but then there's all the things that fall under. There's like work, there's home, there's time management, school, relationships, like impulsivity. And like once you start breaking it down, it just looks so different per person. But the like umbrella of it is often the same. And especially when someone is diagnosed or realizes it like later on in life, or has never taken the time to I guess like seek treatment or seek care, especially some folks who have like taken medication for a long time but have never tried to make any like behavioral changes, or kind of advocate for any accommodations in their life.
Yeah. Again, I can see how it could be this gift, like, oh, I can get this coaching, and but also the not regret, but like the what could have been. There's you can
Yeah.
look from both perspectives. And what are some of the biggest success stories that you've seen?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. There's a lot. We actually we put off our testimonials page like yesterday as well, which I'm stoked about. I can put in the chat later. But one of my favorite is actually, he's a man in his 50s. I think he might be in his 60s. He recently got a new diagnosis, which was wild for him. And like he had like built a really successful life actually, but he realized that he actually didn't like it. Like he was chasing all the wrong things and he wasn't happy. And so with coaching, he essentially ended up switching careers recently, in the last few I guess months, which is wild because like he's been doing the same thing for so long, and then also has made some changes like to become a little bit more productive on his day to day, and he's just so much happier. And even though he like by all normal definitions like took a step back, his like he's just so much happier with his life, which was really beautiful. And then the other one, actually she's a friend of mine, she was one of our first Shimmer members, she's in her 20s. She was also similarly looking for a job and kind of pounding her head against the wall. And then after starting coaching, essentially realized that she wasn't like all the things that she didn't like in jobs and that were holding her back in the past, she wasn't taking those into account while selecting the new job, and specifically having to do with ADHD. So picking jobs that were more ADHD friendly. She's like a big talker and she kept picking jobs that were like she didn't get to talk. So her like thing wasn't shining, but she wasn't realizing it because she was kind of chasing what like, I don't know, her family and the school like thought that she should do. And so going through that together, and then also amending the way that she looked for a job to be more about talking and less about just like applying and putting your resume into the thing. She started going to conferences and stuff, and that was a decision she made with her coach. And now she has an amazing job also in healthcare and mental health, which is really cool, that she really loves, and she gets to talk to people all day. So those are kind of like two of my favorites, but in case anyone's interested, I just put this together. I'm in love with this. I just did this yesterday, so I'm gonna just drop in the chat.
We will be sharing. Great, that's excellent, and we will be sharing a discount code for Shimmer in the follow-up email. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, I mean, what I like about, again, I want to make like similar. I want to find the similarities between what Cave Day and Shimmer is doing, and what I love is there's that guide, there's that support, there's the coach with Shimmer, there's someone that's there that's holding you accountable and helping you identify how you can navigate every day. And in Cave Day, we've got the cave guide or the facilitator that's there, sort of, you can do the body doubling, but they're there to help you stay on track and help you reach your goals, even if they're just the small daily goals. And I think together, that's a really good recipe for making progress in your whatever it is you're wanting to work at here. I'm just going to see here. It's not intelligently dishonest to say that there is a gender bias in diagnosing ADHD when the true. I'm gonna just let that. I want to get to that in just a moment because we are about to go to Q&As. But I have a few other questions here that I like to ask all of our deep dive guests, if you don't mind. So you, Chris, how do you stay focused? Like, what are your tips and tricks?
So for me, there's a few. I have like anchors essentially. And one of the anchors is my calendar for sure. Like if something's not on my calendar, it does not get done. And I have like a bunch of reminders that are linked to my calendar. That's definitely number one. But kind of that's more of like, I guess, my horsepower that keeps me through the day. But what keeps me actually getting the things that energize me and the things that are important done are definitely like my prioritization system. So I have a weekly prioritization system, and then I have a daily one that won't start the day without, and I won't start the week without, even if it means like doing something else a little bit later, because I've tried if I just pummel into the day without that list, I will end up doing a bunch of different things. And at the end of the day, be like, okay, well, none of those were really important, but they were all kind of fun. So I essentially lost a day. So those two things. And then the third one is definitely, which it links well with cave day, is I do a lot of 90-minute deep work sprints with my boyfriend. So we'll like get together, like sit, we have we have a room downstairs that just has like 2 desks next to each other that have like nothing on them, and we'll sit next to each other, like declare our priorities, do them, and then like report back to each other and kind of like compete against each other on like how much of our list that we completed. But I would definitely say those 3 things are probably my like anchors to my system, and then there's other like smaller things that I've tested over the time and experimented with, and then like a certain amount with my ADHD coach that I've just done on like awareness work to like get to this point of this is specific system that works for me.
I have a specific question on your daily to-do list, your daily task list. When do you make that? Do you make it the day before, or do you make it the morning of?
So one of my goals with my ADHD coach was to do it the day before, but I could never do it. I would set all sorts of alarms and I would just not do it. And I think I was just too tired at that point. And I was like, but I know the value of it. If I do it the day before I close all of my work, then I'm like ready for the next day. I don't have all these lingering thoughts in my head about my list. So I think it's good if someone can do it. I've tried so many times and I haven't been able to. Maybe I'll try again from this combo, but I do it in the morning. I'm always a bit more rushed. I wish I did it like when I shut off my work the night before. That would be perfect.
I mean, I think we have to find what works for us, right? Like whatever is working for you. I find that making the list at the end of the day, it sets me up. Like you said, it sets me. If I start my day without that, I'm a little like, I feel like I'm untethered.
Yes.
Which is, it's not bad, but it's, being aware of that, like, okay, I kind of know what I have to do, but if you have it right out, you're less likely to get distracted from the start. Okay, now we've got our like rapid fire questions, and then we'll go into some Q&A. So I hope you are thinking of some questions we can ask of Chris. What's your biggest distraction?
Definitely all like the different trains of thought in my head that are constantly going on.
Who's influenced your work the most, and have you told them?
Honestly, it's actually my founder coach. And yeah, I think I like cry in every session, so she probably knows.
What's a piece of content or a piece of content you've been recommending lately? So it can be book, podcast, show, movie, anything. It doesn't have to be about ADHD, but something that you like to recommend.
It actually relates to what we were talking about earlier, because it's this book. It's called Stolen Focus. It's by Johann Hari. I'll put it in the chat, but it's actually about how our attention economy is driving all of us to have bad attention. It's not really specifically about ADHD, but and kind of like how society plays into that. What are like the societal changes we can make to make that better? But I adore it. I'm gonna write that.
And on that note, are you Kindle, hardcover, paperback, audio, all of the above?
I'm always reading at least 1 to 2 paper books and 1 to 2 audiobooks at the same time, just because I like to switch different gears. It's probably not the most effective, but also because audiobooks are great for like gym, laundry, like anything that I just need to do that I will like stop doing if I don't have like something for my brain to like tether onto. So audiobooks are great for me, but there's something about a physical book that just feels nice, and you just immerse yourself into like a non-screen, non-tech solution that I really like.
Love it. And last question, do you eat breakfast, and did you have breakfast today, and what did you eat? So breakfast questions.
Oh yes, every single day. It's like my favorite meal. I have this smoothie basically that has like all the things that I need in there, like with the fruits and the protein and the caffeine and all the stuff, and it's delicious. I make like one big one for me, my boyfriend, and my roommate, and then I just like go around the house and disperse it and say good morning to everyone.
Amazing. I want to have that smoothie. All right, everybody, I'm opening it up to some questions, but I'm going to jump back to what Matt shared a couple of minutes ago. So if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them at the chat and we'll get to them. Matt says, it is not intellectually dishonest to say that there is a gender bias in diagnosing ADHD. When the true incidence in adults for each gender is unknown, the 4-to-1 ratio may be true with gross diagnoses of huge undetected rates in men. Yeah, I mean,
I had to read that a few times with the double negative in the front, but I think I understand the premise of the question. Yes, I agree. I think that I don't think that gender bias is the only thing there. There's a lot of different like cultural biases and like other things. And the only thing that we do know for a fact is that the research was done on mostly males. And that what we also do know for a fact is that there are many women who are now being diagnosed, and there's a lot of kind of negative trauma that we've collected over often decades that could have been prevented if the diagnoses when we were younger would have caught it. So I definitely don't think that it's the only thing. And I think that there's probably lots of males who are also undetected. So there's probably lots of work that needs to be done, not just in the criteria itself, but probably also just how physicians or primary care providers are trained to detect these things. And I agree, I think there's probably a lot of improvements to be made on all gender fronts.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Matt, for the note. Tamara has a couple of questions here, which I love. How do you manage your ADHD brain and sleep? We'll start with that one first.
How do I manage my ADHD brain? Or brain and sleep like as one thing together, or like brain?
I think the question is, and Tamara, correct us if you're wrong, but like how do you sleep with like how do you manage your sleep with an ADHD?
Oh. Yeah, this is super hard because I sleep late and wake up late. If I could, I would. When I was younger, I used to like sleep at like 6 a.m. and wake up at like 3 p.m. And our family's full of undiagnosed ADHD. And so everyone was like that. And I thought it was normal. And now I've been slowly trying to like push myself back to like a normal-ish circadian rhythm, or somewhere between like I don't want to say normal, but like between what I would like to be and like where I am, just for a bunch of different reasons. And I think for me, like what's helped recently is actually reading before I sleep has been a big one. I used to never put down my phone or the laptop or think about work, and reading like a full hour before you sleep, and not watching Netflix was a big one. I used to always watch Netflix to fall asleep, and I would watch like 2-3 hours because you're just on the next episode. So that definitely helps. And there's a lot of like nootropics out there, and there's one I've recently tried called Beam, but I don't know how I feel about it yet because there's melatonin in it, and I'm unsure if and how I want to integrate that into my life. So yeah, it's super personal. I think you kind of have to like, basically the summary of everything is you kind of have to just like try different things and write down how it affects you, and then try other things and get inspired by other people, because it really is very personal, and something that works for someone might not work for someone else. So that like experimentation and journaling process is really helpful. But I feel like just removing yourself from tech, like tech is read this book from Johann Hari, but tech is like a big part of our problem.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for sharing. One resource that we'd love to share is a book by Daniel Pink called When, and I'll put the link right here, but it sort of helps you determine like what are your personal rhythms. Like 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. is a hard, like maybe that's your natural way of being, but it is hard to function in the working world with those hours. But maybe you are what it's, we know about the night owl and the morning lark and things like that, but like really finding when you work best and what types of work you like to do at certain times of day. And like, if you have autonomy over your schedule and finding like, I can do more cognitive work in the morning and more creative work in the afternoon, which is kind of typical, but that's a really helpful book if you're wanting to think about your own rhythms. All right, back to Tamara's second question. Do you use a paper planner or digital app? And of course, I was distracted in case you mentioned which one you used.
um, so I had a quick thought on the original one that's just random and funny because I think most people can't do this. But if you do work remote, when I worked, so my boyfriend's Brazilian, so we were in Brazil with his family for a while, and they're 1 hour ahead of EST. And being in a time zone that's like 4 hours in front of everyone else that you deal with, that I was thriving. I could wake up at 10 and still be like ahead of everyone else. Or 11 even sometimes, or sometimes I could like go to the beach before everyone else woke up. So obviously not accessible to most people, but if you position yourself in a time zone that's ahead of everyone else, I think that's underrated. And I didn't realize how impactful that was on my life. But paper or digital, so I use digital for pretty much everything just because I can like cross things out, delete things, move things around. I found that before. When I'm on paper, I try too much for it to like look nice because I always prided myself randomly in having really nice handwriting. So I would make like a beautiful list that looks perfect. And then once I like need to move something around, I'm like, no, I can't cross that or move that. And so I get too married to what things look like. So that's very much so a me problem. So that's why I like to have things that are online because I can like move this item easily ahead in front of another item. And then also because it facilitates sharing. So for me, a big driver is accountability. So I will always put my priority list is in a chat with me and my co-founder. And as I cross things off, I'm sure he doesn't actually like care, but I know that he can see it, and that really helps me.
Yeah, accountability. That's kind of the name of the game, right? I love it.
Exactly.
I'm going to see here. We have time for one more question if somebody wants to throw a question in real quick. But while we're waiting for that, I'm quickly wanted to talk about celebrating. So you talked about how you celebrate with your, the coach celebrates with you at the, at the end of each week. And we like to do the same. So at the end of every cave, it's really important to acknowledge, right? To acknowledge the work that you've done. And I imagine with the coaching platform as well, to really look back and see, this is what I did. It's not just to feel like good about yourself and pat yourself, like that's important too, but to really review and see everything that happened. I think that is so critical in our growth. Yeah, I just wanted to, I said I was going to come back to that. I wanted to come back to it.
No, definitely. I think like celebrating and rewards are so massive that I didn't think about before. One of my ADHD coaches was like, I think I was just really overwhelmed at one point, and she was like, oh, when you finish this task, like then what? And I was like, I was stressed about the next task. What do you mean? And then she was like, okay, like like maybe you need to think about adding some sort of reward or something that makes it feel good, because you should feel good about finishing something. But at some point I wasn't even feeling good about it. I was just like, okay, if I finish this one, then I'm thinking about the next one, and the next one I'm like only 0% done. So I'm actually in a worse position. And that was how I was thinking about it. So I was almost sad to finish one because I was like no longer almost done.
Oh, thanks for the honesty. So we've got one last question here, and then we're going to go into our deep work sprint. What are your favorite apps for keeping you focused on track? Where did it go? Oh,
I see it, on track and accountable.
Yes, especially when we fall behind. So even if you just can rattle off an app or two.
Yeah. So actually, I don't really do it in the original apps. I do it in Slack for my priority list. In Notion, I have all of my bigger priorities are in Notion, and they're also shared, and I can tag people on my team to keep me accountable. So I think for me, it's less about the specific app, because I think those two apps are not like groundbreaking or anything. I often find that when I have an app that only does one specific thing, and this is just me, I struggle to stay with it, because if I'm like not really into that specific thing at that moment, I just kind of abandon the app. But with Notion and with Slack, I do so many other things on it. And I will forget my password if I don't use something for a while. So any app that I don't use for a while, I actually end up abandoning. So I'm a bad example of this, but I do know I have like, actually, I can share this, a massive list of apps that our members really like. But I'm just not a big
No, I think that's actually really helpful, Chris. I think it's, less is more. What works, again, it's about finding what works for you. There's so many tools out there and finding what works for you. We like to use Slack and Notion as well. Excellent. Thank you for that. And I'll also just, if you want to go to Shimmer, I just have the link right here. And like I said, at the end for the follow-up, you will get a code to check out Shimmer at a discount. All right, let's thank Chris. Thank you, Chris. You're wonderful. That was really helpful.
Thank you for the questions, and thanks, Tracy, for the it was Tracy, right? Yes, Tracy, for the celebration.
All right, we're going to take our spotlights off here. And all right, friends, it's nice to see all of you. We're back. I can see the view. All right, we're going to go into our deep work sprint. And if you are familiar with Cave Day, you know what's about to come. I know that there are some folks here who have never been to a cave. So welcome. If this is your very first time and you want to share in the chat that you're a first timer, we can welcome you properly. But how this is going to look, if you need to head out, that's totally fine. But we do hope that you can stay for a little deep work time. So we're going to have, like I said, around 45 minutes. Hi, Angie. Nice to have you here. I'm not going to tell you how long that is. It's just know that it's around 45 minutes, but I'll pull you out when the time is over and we'll share some wins. And so what we want to do is remove as many distractions as possible. Close your email if you can. Turn notifications off. If your phone is next to you, we're going to take 30 seconds right now. If your phone is next to you, 30 seconds or less to put your phone in another place. Stand up, put it somewhere else. I dare you. All right, I saw some people moving around. My phone is out of sight. I promise it's in the other room. All right, and we're going to claim what we're working on. So usually what we do, we put it in our, we go into breakout rooms, but to spare time, we're just going to put it right in our name so we can rename ourselves. So we're going to see first name, where you are, keep that as is, and then add 1 or 2 words that helps define what it is you're working on. So mine, for example, will be Molly, Minneapolis, and blog post is what I'm working on. So you can do that by clicking on your, on the 3 dots in the upper right corner of your thumbnail and clicking rename. What that does is just, it helps us stay a little more accountable to what we're doing. We're monotasking here, monotasking over multitasking. Multitasking is a myth, if you didn't know. And as we do in every cave, we're going to open with a little ritual. So if you wouldn't mind joining me in rubbing your hands together, this is just what we do at the start of every session. If you have questions on how this is going to look, you can always direct message me. And I can't wait to see you on the other side. So in 3, 2, 1, do a big clap. All right, the sprint has started. All right, friends, let's share some wins. How did it go in there? What are you feeling good about? I'd love to hear if you're a first timer. Did it feel different? Did it take a while to get into flow? Did you reach your goals? What are some wins we want to share in the chat? 3 paragraphs completed. All right, Tara. Excellent. I'll share that I have our takeaways from this conversation almost completely written. You'll get that. You'll get that in your follow-up email too. Michelle deleted or filed over 100 emails. Woo! Whoa, way to go. I use a session to sign up for Shimmer. Amazing. And complete the onboarding task for their app. All right, Debbie. Sonia says, prep for tomorrow's podcast recording. Great. Amazing. Any other wins? felt kind of weird that my phone was so far away, but finished the doc I was doing. Isn't it funny? Like, did we do the phantom reach? Like, it's not there. It's one of the silliest things that, like, it's so obvious. If your phone is right next to you, it's going to be distracting. What does it feel like to actually put it in another room? It's one of the easiest things we can do. All right, any last minute wins before we wrap up? Got through all my emails and completed 2 more tasks. All right, Dina. Yay! Also, Dina is a friend of mine. It's really nice to have you here, Dina. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. You'll get a follow-up, maybe it's this afternoon, but likely tomorrow morning with a code to check out Shimmer and a code to check out Cave Day if you're not already a member. All right, we always end our cave with a little mini celebration. Let's do a high five right to the camera. In 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye, team.